on stage.
Good afternoon, everybody. How's the session going so far? Good. It's a pleasure to be here. I will cover 4 topics today. First, I'll introduce myself and the firm to you so you know who's in front of you. I'm sure the A&M name is unfamiliar to you, and possibly my name is as well. I'll then spend a little bit of time talking about building a solid foundation, a foundation on which you can then grow your international business. And there the focus will be around talking about what makes a great brand. The focus will be on the local brand. And then we'll transition into thinking about how you grow a brand internationally. And there we'll look at some case studies from local companies that have successfully grown to be very powerful brands internationally. And we'll take some elements that they've focused on, some aspects of their international expansion. We'll highlight those for you to consider in your own journey towards international growth. And lastly, we'll settle up on some key takeaways for you to carry back to your businesses. Very briefly, I actually only joined A&M 3 months ago. So before that, I was a managing director and partner with the Boston Consulting Group. I set up the company in BCG in around 2013, but I've been in Vietnam working for clients since about 2008. I'm always a little bit reluctant to say how long I've been in Vietnam simply because I know the next question that pops up, which is, why am I using a translator if I've been in the country all this time? I think languages have been a little bit difficult for me to acquire. I studied Chinese language and literature in undergrad, but the other languages I've covered Asia Pacific, so China, India, many of the countries in Southeast Asia. So picking one to focus on was difficult for me. But now, since I've dedicated and actually moved to Vietnam, first time ever, I'll be picking up the language. 30 years I've been working in industry and consulting, mostly on large-scale transformation work. So this is strategy leading through the transformation programs, and then specifically picking up initiatives within companies and implementing them. I joined A&M. I think it's probably a firm that most of you don't know. You hear the name A&M, you think, well, what is A&M? A&M, very frankly, is outside Southeast Asia, a very successful firm. They're new to Southeast Asia, only been here about 18 months. I would encourage you to Google them. Our differentiation is pretty clear, and that was the reason why, as soon as I found out they'd come to Vietnam, I left BCG to join them, which is, my feeling is that in Vietnam, A&M's business model is fit for purpose. Right? So what people like you need, what executives in Vietnam need, where the bench of talent, where talent is scarce, clients don't need page decks. They don't need big stacks of PowerPoint. They need consultants and executives to jump into their business and help build the business with them. And then to put the fees at risk. So only get paid if the business delivers the value that's being targeted. And that's the A&M model, very simply put. So as we talk about building a strong local brand, I'm going to take you back to your undergraduate business degree, maybe your MBA program. Just talk very briefly about what are the components of a very strong brand. You probably will have heard the term brand ladder. Yes. So brand ladder basically starts with, at the top of the house, very clearly, what is the emotional benefit you want to convey to your consumer, to your customer, through your brand. By emotional benefit, it's something like belonging. If you use our product, you belong to other people like yourselves, who are elect and special, who are likewise consuming this brand. Or you might connect to a value that an individual carries really close to their heart, right? I expect people to be treated fairly. That might translate into fair wages for our employees or for our farmers. Right? At the highest level, there is an emotional benefit that you're trying to convey. And so if you're thinking about a brand strategy, it really starts at the top. What is the essence of the brand? What do we stand for? What are our values? And how do we differentiate from the values that we communicate to our customers? The next level down then is really around the functional benefits. Right? So what is it that you gain from our product? What's the function? Now that might be something in terms of taste. Tastes better than everything else. Right? Perhaps it performs better than any other product. And so if you're thinking about your brand strategy, then what you really want to say is, what's the promise of the brand? What do I promise to deliver? If you pick this up, I'm going to give you a better taste. Now think about McDonald's for a minute. Like, what is their brand strategy around their product? McDonald's strategy on their brand is, you go into any McDonald's anywhere in the world, it's going to be clean. It's clean, it's safe, you're not going to get sick. You use the restroom, maybe not in San Francisco or New York right now, it's going to be safe and clean, right? And they put in processes to ensure that every time you go to a McDonald's, anywhere in the world, it's a clean environment. Bright, open, clean. Now the next level down from that are the technical benefits. What makes our product unique on the technical delivery side, right? We use the finest materials. We have cutting edge technology, right? Our products will never break down. We've got the best warranty, we guarantee it. Right? These technical benefits that you deliver, or the technical benefits, is the other element in your strategy. And when you're thinking about constructing your brand strategy, your brand pillars really need to convey those benefits to the customer. And it's important to take those benefits that you're promising and then converting them into actions that you're going to take as an enterprise to deliver on that promise. And then the last step is, how do you deliver it? How do you line up the organization, people, processes, what you measure, what you reward on, to ensure that you deliver those benefits to the consumer, both at the technical level, the functional level, and the emotional level. So that's brand management 101. That's like a brand strategy, top to bottom. And again, I apologize for taking you back to undergraduate. I'm sure many of you in this room have seen this before. But it's an important thing to think about first. Like, before I go internationally, how good is my brand locally? Can I really bring a brand internationally if I'm not strong locally? Some have tried, some have succeeded, many have tried, many have failed. Now, if you've got the basics right, then it's important to start thinking about international. What I'd like to talk about are 4 elements, and these are based on work that, I'm just sort of distilling sort of key messages across clients that I've worked with, both regionally and internationally, that have made that transition to international growth. And let's distill 4 lessons from it. First lesson, think big. What's your global ambition? You have 5 years from now, 10 years from now, what percentage of your revenue would you like to have derived from international markets? Right? Have a big vision. What is that vision? Have an idea, where do you want to go, right? Which markets would be most likely to receive my product and favor my product? And there might be a cultural affinity that I have with another market where the Vietnam brand really stands out. Right? So top of mind, something pops up, maybe Korea. Right? Korean culture and Vietnamese culture are very similar. There's a lot of affinities there. I hear that from a lot of Vietnamese business people who work with Koreans. The work culture is very similar. How you build relationships is really very similar. Right? So maybe there's affinity, there's markets where you have a natural affinity. Second step is to build your global talent and governance model. Right? As you start to go internationally, you have to really think about how you bolt onto your business international talent who can help you to navigate those markets, both identifying which markets, but also navigating the route to the market. I'm reminded suddenly of an airline in Indonesia called Garuda. Right? It's a big international carrier. lots of international routes. They also have an annoying tendency to fly their airplanes into the ground, which I can tell you as a business traveler, that's very annoying. It really ruins your day if your airplane crashes, or your life. They had a 50th year anniversary, and they wanted to celebrate that they've overcome challenges in their business. So they emblazoned on the back of their seats, they put like the head, that head thing that protects the seat cushion from hair dye. And they painted the side of the aircraft. And you know what they painted? They painted Garuda Airlines 50 years of challenges. That's a terrible thing in English. Now, I know that may not translate very well, but when you see that, an airline that has had a history of crashing their airplanes into the ground, they spent tens of millions of dollars on a branding campaign to say, we've had 50 years of challenges, come fly our airplane. It's not a good message. Now, I can guarantee you, if they just picked one of the backpackers out of the airplane and said, hey, review this, copy edit this for me, and make sure this translates well into English, they could have saved themselves. For me, I still tell that joke 20 years later. Right? It's important to bring on international talent to make sure that your messages translate well to the intended market. Next then, pursue a global markets approach. Right? And be careful. International is not some monolithic market. It's comprised of 260 over individual countries, each very different from the next, some more similar than dissimilar, but many very, very different dissimilar, right? Doing business in Vietnam is very different for me, personally, from doing business in Thailand. How I approach clients, the time it takes to build relationships, how I build those relationships, very, very different here from in Thailand. There's more similarity with Vietnam, I think. With Korea, I've worked in Korea, and I do see those similarities in how those relationships are built. So choose your markets carefully as well. And also, I think, as you're choosing markets, reflect on the brand of the country. What does Vietnam stand for? What do people think about when they think of Vietnam, and how does that translate into how they think about Vietnamese brands? Right? It's a little bit like a sovereign credit rating. Right? If I'm an international investor and I'm thinking about putting money into a company in Vietnam, the maximum rating I can assign to an individual country is the sovereign rating for the country. Even though it might be blue chip in the country, the sovereign rating is Vietnam's sovereign rating. So, similar with brand, when people think about Vietnam, they think about Vietnam in the context, when they think about a Vietnam brand, they think about Vietnam in the context of the Vietnam economy in the Vietnam country. And the last point is optimize for global operations. And the key here is, and I think this is obvious, as you grow internationally, your supply chains may need to shift. Where you concentrate operations will likely need to shift. And so this needs to be a very adaptive approach as you grow your business. And I know for many of you, which are small businesses right now, this is probably years out, but it's worthwhile to be thinking about it now. I'd like to spend a little bit of time just going through some examples. We'll talk a little bit about Trung Nguyen Coffee as a good example of a company that aspired to be global very early in their history. We'll spend a minute talking about FPT, which is a company which has really focused on its operations, on its talent, global talent. Building the talent pool that really helped to bring that business internationally, and really having a very strong international leadership team in their domestic market as well, which is somewhat unusual for a Vietnamese company. We'll talk about Vina Milk, which is really a good lesson on how to go global by being local, right? Adapting your brands to local tastes. And then we'll lastly talk about Viettel, which is a great example of a company that really knows their specialization. Where do they fit into the international telecommunications market, and how do they compete? Where do they compete? Great lessons learned from them as well. Let's talk first about Legend. I think it's kind of funny when you look at Trung Nguyen Coffee. I apologize for Trung Nguyen Coffee. They have in their name global from the beginning. They always envisioned themselves to be a global company. Now that's pretty audacious, right? To be a small company, envisioning yourself as global from day one. Right? You look at their marketing, G7 coffee, very aspirational. And what they've done a very good job of doing early on was they made sure that their products were placed in international events and on airlines. Right? So anybody flying on Vietnam Airlines tastes the coffee. What's this coffee? Oh, it's Trin Nguyen coffee. Right? Locally, they were a very early innovator in the modern coffee shop, right? Not the sidewalk streets with plastic tables and stuff, but actually an air-conditioned modern coffee shop. When foreign visitors started coming to Vietnam, they had a choice. Do I sit on that plastic bench, or do I go into an air-conditioned place and have a cup of coffee where I can get like a traditional Vietnamese coffee, but I can also get an espresso? When these people go home, they remember, Vietnam is a coffee culture. And it's not a big step for then an international visitor, when they return, to think about taking home the coffee. And now it's available locally in their own market. I'll buy that coffee and bring it back home. They associate Vietnam with great coffee and coffee culture. Where are they today? They're in 100 countries, and they have coffee shops, bistros, in 5 countries. So they're in America, they're in China, Korea, Singapore, and Japan. Again, these are countries where you have a large diaspora of Vietnamese people, or very strong cultural affinity with Vietnam. Let's spend a minute talking about FPT. So FPT, I think we all know, a very strong IT firm, providing systems integration services, IT outsourcing. Right? Very strong locally. They figured out very early in their transformation that Vietnam has a pretty deep bench for engineering talent, computer engineering talent. And the cost differential in Vietnam is very similar to the cost differential in India. India a few years ago, I think it's still more advantageous here. And they began to sell those supplies internationally. And they were very clever very early on to bring in international management into their company and seat their board of management and their directors with international talent, right? So if you look at FPT, on their board, on their leadership team, they have representation, obviously, from Vietnam, France, India, and I think the last one was Japan. I apologize, I lost my glasses 2 days ago, so I'm blind as a bat. All I see is a room full of black scalps, so hard for me to see the details on this. If we look at their employee base, they've got 63,000 employees, 4% of whom are international. That's about 2,400, right? 2,400. And they've got branches all around the world. I think a key takeaway here is they're actually a certified great place to work. Not only in Vietnam, but in other countries, in the United States, Japan. What does that tell you? Great place to work. If you're a foreign talent, and I can tell you a lot of the Chinese companies are not as good at this, by the way. If you're a foreign talent, what do you look for in a job? Great pay, that sort of table stakes. Being treated fairly, table stakes. Opportunities for advancement, that's key. The ability to rise to the board of management and take a seat at the table, really important to attract top talent. Moreover, you have international placement opportunities for them. I might be working in America, and I come to Vietnam. Can I go from Vietnam and go somewhere else with the company? Can I get this international exposure? Having that ability to convey a real strong international value proposition is also attractive to recruit talent. Vita Milk is a good example of a company that has pursued going global by going local. Yes, they have scale. By the way, just a small side note on Vita Milk. I don't know if you know this, but they're in the top 10 globally of dairy companies by market value, which is quite remarkable for a state-owned company that have delivered that much value to shareholders. In fact, most don't. Most state enterprises don't deliver value. But what they've done They've built a global supply chain. They've purchased dairies in New Zealand, they've purchased dairies in America. They're also using those dairies not only to supply their home market here in Vietnam, but they've chosen to go local to distribute their products to consumers in those markets, and are being successful. And I think this is a lesson they learned here in Vietnam. What do I mean by that? Vietnam is actually one of the most innovative dairy companies in the world. And if you're a Friesland Campina and you come to Vietnam, guess where your R&D function is? In Singapore. If you're Vina Milk, it's here. If you're Vina Milk in North America, it's in North America. What does that tell you? It tells you that local tastes vary significantly. And they've been able to balance that trade-off between standardized approaches and achieving scale through one-size-fits-all approaches versus, in some cases, going local, right? Developing local R&D. That's been their advantage in Vietnam, fighting off the international competition, and they've taken that back in their international expansion and have gone local as well. And how are they doing? Well, they've got dairies in North America and local distribution. They've got Encore Milk, local product brands, and they're also in the Philippines distributing. And they also have a fairly large wholesale distribution business in the Middle East where they just export milk that's distributed by third-party partnerships. Viatel is a good example of companies that of a company that's optimized for global operations. What's their strength? They do business in places that a lot of other companies won't do business. They've got very significant penetration in African markets. They're in Myanmar. So these are countries that are somewhat neglected by the international operators. They're also very low cost in the sense that the consumer in those markets doesn't have a substantial amount of money to spend on telecommunications. Their advantage is they're very low cost to build out. Right? They can build the towers, they can build the equipment, the infrastructure at a very low cost, leveraging the military in many instances to go in and put up towers and put in the infrastructure very quickly and at low cost. And that's their advantage. They're able to do that quickly, they're able to do it in remote areas, and they're able to do it in places where many other companies are either unwilling or unable to conduct business. Again, for them, it's been very, very successful. I think they're operating in 10 countries now and are recognized as one of the 500 most valuable brands in the world and are also one of the fastest growing telecommunications companies in the world. And here domestically, they've been branching off into data services and other higher value-adding services for consumers, and they're carrying those lessons over into their international markets as well. So where to begin? Let's imagine this is a multi-year journey. Maybe it's a 10-year journey. Maybe it's a 15-year journey for you. But it starts by getting the basics right in your home market. How good is your brand? How consistent do you deliver both the values, the promise? How consistent are you in delivering that? How good are you at measuring how good you are at delivering that? Right? Have you put in place the metrics, the operational metrics, the customer metrics, customer satisfaction metrics that tell you how you're doing? Once you get the basics right, and by the way, in basics, I mean, what's your plan for hiring talent? Before you go to that foreign market, first foreign market that you're thinking through, unless of course you're distributing through, an online channel. What's your plan? How are you going to make sure that your messages land well with your targeted consumer? Remember the Garuda story, right? What you think it might be saying to consumers might not be what's registering with them. So what's your plan for that? How are you going to hire? How are you going to afford it? Right? You're going to contract somebody? Put the basics in place. Once you get those basics in place, again, then start thinking about organizational scaling. So how do I build my team in that market? I'm going to have to cede control to people who don't necessarily share my same culture, who may come from different backgrounds, and will be operating in markets that I'm unfamiliar with. How will you do that? and how you govern your business as you release some of that operational control to people that are new to your business. Then also begin to think about establishing your global platforms, right? So which partners are you going to be working with? Who will help you consistently? Right? Did well in one market, how are you going to scale that to the next market? Are there partners you should be looking at that have multi-market presences so that you can partner with one and not have to shift partners for the next market? Right? Think in terms of building a global platform that allows you to grow, and you should also be considering about possible acquisitions and mergers in those markets. And the last step then is really around optimizing. It's important to think about a lot of these international businesses are constantly changing their organization model, their operating model, their supply chains based on shifting conditions in the markets that they're operating in. And so staying on top of that and building the systems that measure and detect these changes in your business are critical. And I think COVID revealed pretty clearly to many of the international players that you have to be very adaptive very quickly based on what you're experiencing in the markets. I think that today, just frankly, is benefiting Vietnam. We're seeing a lot of companies diversify their supply chains out of China into Vietnam. And it's both benefiting us here locally in terms of the investment into our economy. But it also brings challenges. If you're building operations in the local market, obviously, and they've got 105 million people in that market, they're going to want to start selling that product locally. So it's a double-edged sword, right? They're both investing to export, but they're also investing in many cases to start competing locally. Okay, so those are the lessons I would take away, and I wish you good luck on that journey. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you so much.